I've gotten a lot of requests to basically unveil the inner workings of ChatGPT and other similar tools. I gave a presentation to the State Bar on the 2nd of November. So I'm recreating that presentation for you all. Uh, Things move at lightning speed in the world of AI. So don't be surprised if some of this stuff is out of date. If you watch it even a week later. With that, hopefully this will provide the basis for your understanding of AI tools and what they're capable of, and just help you navigate the intricacies of the ecosystem, which again are always changing. I have these slides available at txhq.org/HYFNAI, which is handling your first or next AI case, which is the State Bar presentation that I conducted. There are some additional materials there that will probably be useful for you, including some example slides, some links that are going to be useful for implementing your own AI tools, and some other things here and there that should help you grasp some of these concepts. Who am I? Why listen to me? Well, I'll give you a list of credentials, and hopefully that helps establish my credibility here. I'm the managing partner of Promise Legal. We're a one-stop shop for tech startups. We're HQ'd in Austin, Texas, although we practice in Houston and San Antonio as well. I'm the founder of the Journal of Law and Technology at Texas. That's the student-run technology journal at UT. I currently serve as the vice president of EFF Austin, the vice chair of the Open Source Software Committee for the ABA Science and Technology section, vice chair for the InfoSec Committee. I'm a former council member for the Texas Bar's Computer and Technology section, and I'm an ABA on the Rise Top 40 Award winner. Beyond that, I got my JD at UT. I also received a degree in philosophy and computer science. I got my computer science degree so I could be the attorney who understood tech, but I loved it. In another life, I think I would have just been a programmer, but I wanted to be a tech attorney, and here we are. So let's start off with something that's not really within the scope of this talk, but it's important to note. A lot of people are concerned about privacy matters surrounding AI. And as sort of the slide image indicates, I don't take those concerns too seriously. If you disclose information that you're not supposed to disclose via email, it's just as bad as if you disclose information you're not supposed to disclose using AI. So yeah, caution is warranted, but no more than it with any other tool. Understanding the tool is really going to be your best line of defense against accidental disclosures, not avoiding the use of AI. And I believe that should apply to in-house counsel and larger law firms as well. This is not solo and small firm specific. So let's unpack a little bit of how AI works. There's a sort of mysticism around it right now. It just seems like magic. It seems like, you're talking to a person in some instances. It has its flaws, but more or less people see it and they just think of it as a black box that can do this amazing thing. Google itself was a magical sort of innovation when it came out. Spreadsheets, I'm told, are also a big upstart in the world of technology. AI is just another form of those innovations. It's really just algorithms at base. It's lots of numbers and math applied to text. Understanding that will help you understand how to get the best results from your AI tools. With search engines, it's more or less intuitive for most people understanding what they do, right? They go and they look at all these websites. They have a giant database with access to literally every website that you can find in the search engine. They then take what you type into the search bar and they try and find the best match for that content and then give you the link to connect with that content. So it's about taking your input, matching it to someone else's output, and then connecting the two. AI is fairly similar. It's also a really large database. It also takes your input and tries to match it against some other inputs, but there are some key differences here. So with AI, I like to use the analogy of those old high school projector machines that use the transparencies. You remember those? You could see through the sheet except for what was printed on it, and then the light would reflect it up onto the board, and you'd have whatever you were looking at. You can think of an AI database as, instead of a database with like regular sheets of paper, it's a stack of transparent pieces of paper. And because of the amount of data that's out there, when you look down at the stack, it's going to look like a jarbled mess, except there will be some patterns that more or less are present within the data. The simplest and most obvious example of a pattern might be the word the, being at the beginning of a piece of content. A lot of content starts with the word the. It's just one of those articles that's prevalent enough and used at the beginning of a document often enough that it's fairly certain that any piece of content could start with the word the. So if you look down at that stack, you would see a slightly darker spot with the word the at the beginning of the document. Obviously, that word would be present in other contexts and other positions, but there's a strong chance that that is a standout sort of pattern within the data. When you put your input in, when you say you want a certain kind of text, the AI looks for patterns that match your input. And then it looks at all of the things that are around that matched pattern to try and predict what comes next. So if you were to try and search for something very generic, like who is the current president of the United States, it would look through all the data that it has and it would try and find that pattern. Because it's a fact that exists in the world, there's likely to be a number of patterns of text out there that exactly match the current president as Joe Biden. What the AI then does is it looks at all the text around it. It might say he was born in a certain year. It might say he is from Delaware. It might say any number of things, but there will generally be a pattern of content surrounding his name. Like he's the great president, he's a terrible president, all the various things that are out there. And it will try and match your intent to the data that's out there. It won't be perfectly factual because it's taking all of that data and turning it into a set of numbers and trying to predict based on averages and complicated math that I don't understand. But basically, you're going to see different outputs when you put in the same query multiple times, because there's going to be more or less equal amounts of data out there that actually matches the pattern you're looking for. So let me take a step back here. I tend to get in the weeds a little too quickly, so let me take a quick step back. When you ask your AI for information about a topic, it can sometimes return the correct answer and sometimes return the incorrect answer, and that's because of like how patterns work. So the current president is Joe Biden is not always a true statement. So in the next 4 or 8 years, we'll see a different president take up the mantle, and it will be true that the current president is X, Y, or Z. Because of that, when you ask the AI who is the current president, there is a substantial chance that it will pick up a false piece of information. So it might say Joe Biden, but it might also say Donald Trump or Barack Obama or whoever else, because there's that data out there in the wild. If you were to ask it a question that is more or less a static fact, such as when was the United States founded? Well, the United States was founded in 1776 is by and large going to be the answer out there in the data. So it's a pretty prominent pattern among that mess of data. So when the AI looks for that pattern and then it looks for what typically surrounds this question of when was the United States founded, it's going to see one pattern stand out, and that's going to be 1776. So because the AI looks for a pattern within the data and then creates a set of averages around that data to create the output it creates for you, there are certain things you need to keep in mind when you're trying to get the best out of your AI tool. So with a search engine, you've probably seen this before. There will be some examples in that link that I shared with you earlier, but basically you can do something like quotation marks around a term. You can use and or operators. You can do date filtering, various things to make sure that the results that you get from a search engine are the results you're looking for. With an AI, it's somewhat similar, except the way that I found to be the most reliable way to get accurate information, usable information, is to try and match the pattern that you expect to find in the source material. So an example of that is, what example would you find in a statute, right? The way that a statute is drafted, it'll probably have a section symbol or perhaps just an acronym in a very formulaic sort of layout. So instead of saying what statutes govern contract law in Texas, you might use the section symbol, you might use the acronyms that you are privy to, you might use technical jargon that you use with other attorneys that you might not use with lay people. And that's because you want the pattern that the AI matches to be in the midst of other data that you're actually looking for. If you say, how do you start a company in Texas? The pattern matches to a lot of lay people websites. So you'll get Wikipedia, you'll get WikiHow, you'll get LegalZoom, you'll get all these things that are geared towards lay people and don't necessarily give you the insights that you need. So you want to try and pattern match with the content that is speaking to you. So whether that's a legal blog or the text of a statute or what have case law, it sort of doesn't matter. But trying to mimic that format and structure and feel in your question is going to help you find more accurate information. Okay. So yeah, this is just a note that you have done this before. So similar to the search engines, it's really about the structure of your input in order to improve your output. But there's a lot more you can do with AI to improve your results than there are with search engines and improving your results. So what are some of those tools? We're going to talk about fine-tuning, embedding, vector databases, function calling, and chaining. Those are sort of the bedrock things that have been around since the beginning of not quite ChatGPT, a little bit before that even. GPT-3 was really where AI was starting to take off, and these tools started to be available. Now, with the Dev Day announcements from OpenAI, A lot of these functionalities are available to you with ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is not required to use these approaches. And we'll talk about the value of using ChatGPT versus using another tool later in this presentation. So first up is fine-tuning. So what is fine-tuning? It's kind of like teaching an AI grammar. A lot of people mistakenly use fine-tuning to try and teach the AI new information, and that's not really how it works. It's more about teaching the AI how to structure its response. So think about it like Jeopardy, the game Jeopardy. It starts off with the answer to a question, and then the contestants respond with the question that the piece of information is answering. Um, let's do a simpler example. Let's use dates as an example. So if you ask an AI, what's the first day of the calendar year? It could tell you January 1st. It could say 1/1/2023. There's like a lot of ways that it might answer that question while giving the same piece of information. Similarly, if you asked an AI, what's on my calendar today? What time are my meetings? What does next week's schedule look like? It'll return that information to you, but again, in a number of different formats. It might say, you have a meeting at 3 o'clock today, you have a meeting at 1500 hours, you have meetings on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you have meetings on 11/22/23. There's just a lot of different ways it can output that information, but in a lot of cases, you're going to want a very specific way of receiving that data so you can use it for other purposes. So, for example, if you're a power automator, like if you use Zapier and you have a lot of different connections, it's useful to have a consistent type of output to then plug in and know you can rely on some action happening downstream. So an example to run with the date example might be that you use AI to generate a date format to put something on your calendar. It could be to send something as a reminder to a client or whatever the case might be. With fine tuning, you essentially model the behavior you're looking for from your AI. So you'll have, say, a spreadsheet. It's not quite a spreadsheet, but spreadsheet works for our purposes today. You have a spreadsheet where in the first column, you have a bunch of different prompts, which is what you might be asking the AI. So what free times do I have available tomorrow? When is my next dentist appointment? Can you tell me what a week from tomorrow is? What day a week from tomorrow is? Just like any sort of iteration of how you might ask for a date. And then in the next column over, corresponding to the previous column, you would put the response in the format you want. So a common format might be, the MM/day/year, right? So for today, it would be 11/14/2023. And then you do that all the way down the column and you provide it to the AI. You create a fine-tuned model and it knows, okay, anytime the user is asking me for a date related answer, I output it in that same format, the month/day/year. That's like the use case of fine tuning. You can do other things with it beyond just numerical data presentation. So for example, I have a fine tuning that is based around our firm's brand voice. So when I'm generating content for our social media, for example, the AI uses similar cadence and similar tone and things like that, although it's providing the substantive information based on whatever other mechanisms it has available to it. So fine tuning, kind of like grammar, teaches the AI how to respond. Okay. Embeddings are where you can actually teach it new information. Embeddings are a process of taking a piece of human readable data and turning it into the machine readable data. So the databases of all the information that AI is trained on uh, is largely a series of numbers. It's just, it's not truly words turned to numbers. It's pieces of words get turned into numbers and then stored in this database of relational numbers and computation. So an embedding is taking your particular information and creating it and outputting it into that format so that when you ask a question of the AI, it can understand what information you've provided to it and respond based on that information. So this will be useful for drafting purposes, for answering FAQs, things like that, where the information is something you can provide to it. It can be useful for discovery. Anything where you need to retrieve data from something that you have provided to the AI, you can use an embedding for. Some examples of what you can use embeddings for. What do we use? We have one for helping draft our newsletters. So obviously the AI can't tell people what we've been up to. And it doesn't know how we want the information presented. Like it can speak in the brand voice, but that's sort of limited. A newsletter, you want to follow certain industry best practices. You want to pass along certain kinds of information. Maybe you have some examples of really successful newsletters that you want to emulate. An embedding is a good use case for that. So with our newsletter one, we have a number of industry best practices that we, typed up and we uploaded into the AI. And now it has at its access this list of best practices. So we might say, hey, notify our clients via newsletter that X, Y, and Z has happened and follow industry best practices. So it's a way to sort of guide the AI to the answers that you want. We have another one that is for privacy law. It's more experimental personally, but basically we upload case law about privacy into the database. We might include some commentary or some memos, just whatever we have that we find to be a reliable source and useful for questions surrounding privacy law. And then we can ask the AI questions and we can tell it only answer based on what you have available to you that we've given to you. So that's really useful for a number of purposes, including, memos, briefs. You can use it to retrieve the location of information. So maybe you remember something about privacy law and you can't remember where you heard it or where you came up with that idea. You can use the embeddings to actually identify where it is. It's pretty good at that. Now, embeddings sort of imply and require vector stores. A vector store is like a filing cabinet. You use it to organize things, and it's where you store your embeddings. So an embedding is a particular document or set of documents that are converted. A vector store is a collection of those documents. And so when I say we have a privacy law set up, we have a number of embeddings of a number of cases and a number of memos that are sorted into a vector store. And then the AI is told to answer its questions based on that vector store. Some additional value that you can get from vector stores that you can share it with team members. You can use it to specialize a tool. So, for example, if you're litigating and you're representing a plaintiff versus a defendant, you have different things that you're seeking to demonstrate in your documents. So having a vector store that's about drafting on the plaintiff side might not be as useful as for the defense side. So you might have separate vector stores with separate types of information, even overlapping in some cases. But the point is that you're able to limit the AI to that particular set of information. Function calling. Okay, so function calling is fairly advanced. It's something that Chat GPT is now offering. The most relatable way to think about function calling is with Zapier, and I understand not everyone has heard of Zapier. It's spelled Zapier. I thought it was Zapier for the longest time, but their slogan is Zapier makes you happier, and it's ZAPIER.com. I actually have a walkthrough on how to set up an AI and Zapier automation on my blog, rise.law. I think it's titled Setting Up an Automated Wiki for Your Firm, something along those lines. And that'll walk you through the process of creating accounts for all these various tools, which is probably a good starting point if you've never used it before. But it's a drag and drop editor for connecting different tools to each other. So you might connect your email account to Microsoft Word. You might connect your calendar to your email. There's a lot more that it can do, but those are very basic and relatable use cases. So perhaps you want a client file and a welcome letter to be generated. So maybe you send an email to a client and then you have a BCC to a specialized email address. And whenever that email address receives an email with a keyword, or maybe just it's only for specific uses. So whenever it receives an email, it'll trigger a bunch of functions such as create a client folder in Google Drive or in OneDrive or whatever it is you use, add a document based on this template and rename it based on the name of the person I'm emailing, right? Like that's a simple sort of workflow that's present in a lot of firms that are using automation. AI can be taught to discern the value of each function and have all functions available to it and choose the right one to call. So with a lot of these automations in the past, you've had to direct it, you've had to use keywords, you've had to do something to distinguish one function from another and make sure that it gets called when you want it to be called. It's a lot of dependent logic. With AI, you can now say, here are all my functions and I need you to handle them. So instead of sending a special email to a special inbox, you might just always talk to your AI and say, hey, start the client onboarding workflow, or schedule a meeting for me with, John Doe next week, or whatever the use case might be. It'll take the information you provide to it, turn it into the appropriate format, and then call the function for you. So that's very useful for a lot of things. It's sort of an exercise in creativity. It's hard to identify a limit with this type of functionality. So I'll go into a little bit more on this and what else you can do, but let's go through a couple more pieces of information first. So chaining. Chaining is like, I like to think of it like teamwork. So where each of those things that I sort of reviewed previously can happen in a box. Chaining is where you take one tool and connect it to another tool, and you can sort of do that without many theoretical limits. So an example of a chain that you might use, and this is one that I use, is write a have one AI write a outline for a blog post for some content that you want to generate for your firm. So you might say, write an outline for a blog post talking to an infrastructure as a service platform about the need for a privacy attorney. Outlines are fairly simple. They're hard to screw up. Like I could give that to a high school kid and not feel bad about it, kind of thing, like that type of task, because the outline doesn't really have any bearing on your knowledge as an attorney. Like it's not going to screw that up. Then I send the output to another AI and I say, generate the topic sentence for each item underneath this outline, which again is something that's pretty simple, hard to screw up. Even if it quote unquote misstates something, it won't really misstate it because it's setting up the conversation. It's not drawing any conclusions or presenting anything as fact. And that's like the kind of thing I'm not super worried about, right? Like it's not giving legal advice or anything. Then from there, I might say, take those topic sentences and turn it into paragraph form, which again is not too difficult. It'll be a little light on substantive content, but it'll fluff it out, which is partially what you want in a blog post. And then finally, I might send it to another one that says, okay, according to these industry best practices, edit and revise this draft. And that'll, clean it up. It'll make sure it has a logical flow. You can do a number of other things like, say you always write about privacy or specific things. You can set up vector stores with the information that you want included in your blog post. And you can say, now, pull information from these vector stores that support each argument or each statement within this blog post. And it'll do that. And there is some risk. So you've all probably heard of the various problems that people have run into while using AI, such as, the sanctioned attorneys who use the AI and clearly didn't know what they were doing, but they didn't check the citations and it was like made up cases. That is a risk. The tools that I sort of discussed previously will help mitigate that. It is still a risk. But what you can do is you can tell the AI to return the source material with its answers. And that is invaluable. So everything that I get generated from an AI connects to a source material, and it gives me a context window of about, what is it, like maybe 400 or 500 words, with whatever it's citing to for its generations. And so I can click on the link, I can look and say like, okay, yeah, it does say that, or wait, that sounds wrong. I can verify all those things, which is great. Like that's the big hurdle with AI, is just making sure you don't make up something that sounds good but isn't true. You can make that happen. So that is an example of a chain that I actually use more or less and have pretty solid results with. Now, I've sort of gone over all the various things that you can do with AI. How do you go about making it happen? So there are a few different approaches, from free tools to paid to the more advanced sort of paid options. If you've never used AI before, if you're not very comfortable with it, I would start with a free option. There's a ChatGPT is the famous one. There's Claude, Google Bard, and then there are a couple of others that are more off the beaten path: Llama, Mistral, Falcon. You don't need to write those names down, but the free options are a good starting point. with ChatGPT at least, which is the one that I've used the most often, you can, even with the free version, turn off use of your data, so you can use it reasonably or reliably for client stuff. But until you know what you're doing and you're sure that you've shut off that faucet, just use it for other things and just get a sense for how it works, what it's good at, what it's not good at. But if you're familiar with ChatGPT at all, or you have more, if you're just ready for more, I would look at the paid versions. So paid ChatGPT is a good next step. I have it, even though I use more advanced stuff as well. It provides embeddings. It can allow you to do fine tunings. There is some function calling. As of yesterday, which was the last day I played around with it, it's a little unreliable in its current form. I think that's probably because the announcement for these new tools was last week, and I'm sure their servers are getting just slaughtered. They've had these constant outage notices at the top of their website. So if you've been frustrated by function calls and trying to upload your own documents and things like that, just be a little patient as things slow down and their servers get up to speed. Those problems should largely go away. I imagine it's still not going to be up to date with the state of the art. There are other tools out on the market that have been around since before ChatGPT that help you handle these things internally. So self-hosted, your own internal networks, that sort of thing. And they are ahead of ChatGPT in terms of implementations and whatnot. So you can an example would be you can use ChatGPT with these tools to as your source for AI generations, but then you can use an external tool or a self-hosted tool or whatever else as your embeddings source. You can send off function calls with different operating systems, things like that. There's like a lot of ways you can put things together beyond just with ChatGPT. Some of the ways that they have been ahead of ChatGPT include all of these things that they just released at Dev Day. These things were made possible by the APIs provided by OpenAI, but the implementation has really been external members of the community who want a certain functionality that just isn't present in the ChatGPT interface. Some current differences in implementation with the things that ChatGPT has implemented include custom function calling. So ChatGPT has released something called Actions, which allows you to use a GPT bot that calls a function. There's a Zapier version of it, which I have not tested, but I'm sure is great. Zapier has been testing their function calling stuff for a while, so they've been working on it. It's probably good. But with external tools, you can chain a lot of them together, whereas with the back end of the current ChatGPT interface, it doesn't seem like you can add a bunch of functions together. It seems like you have to stick to a couple of functions all within the same source. So if you use Zapier for a lot of stuff, but not everything, like you might be stuck, right? Like that is one of the limitations of the ChatGPT interface as it is now. Obviously, OpenAI has a lot of resources and all the other players have a lot of resources. So they'll probably look to compete on those points in the near-ish term. But there are some other things that are, being developed that are new that haven't been discussed by OpenAI as far as the public is aware, such as memory caching, which is where instead of doing a search and having a generation happen from scratch, which has costs associated, low cost, but the more you use it, the more you can see how costs can go up really quick. These memory cachings take your previous responses and just pull them back without making another call and incurring additional costs. So if you have static information, such as a website FAQ, right? A user comes to your website and has a question about your firm. You don't necessarily need to regenerate that whole answer. You just need it stored so that way when the next person asks, that answer is available. So that's an example of how that memory caching can be useful, and also of a tool that is not quite available with OpenAI yet, if ever. So these external tools may or may not continue to innovate and have a role in the marketplace. I think they're worth understanding at the very least. So once you move beyond like the paid chat GPT where you can use their built-in functionality, the other option would be, going for a bespoke sort of legal AI solution, such as with the other big players, like we all know who they are. They tend to be expensive. They will be at least a few $100s up to maybe $1,000. I believe that the amount of work that they can do is worth that money. However, if you put in the time, you can actually get better results with far less cost, if you just put in the time to invest in your own systems. Yeah, okay. If there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or shoot me an email. I know this is a lot of content, and usually I like doing these live with a Q&A, but we'll do it like this. Okay, so costs. So there, like I said, there's a free version. Chat GPT Plus or Premium, whatever they call it, is $20 a month. I believe it's about the same for Google Bard and for Claude and the other big players. When you start going into the more bespoke solutions, right now they cost an arm and a leg. It's like, between, depending on the tool, between like $300 and $1,000 per attorney. I think that's overpriced. I understand why they price it that way. I just don't think those prices are sustainable. Before I go on a tangent here, the other costs. So if you do a self-hosted type thing, I'm a really heavy user. I have a ton of automations running. I use it as a sounding board for various ideas and things that I'm trying to put together. And my most expensive month was under $100. So you can probably get a whole firm, like let's say a firm of 10 people running for under $500, no sweat. Yeah, so you can go a lot further if you have your own systems made up. But let's go on that tangent a little bit about the costs of the bespoke solution. So I mean, AI is clearly here to stay. I think we're at a place where in the next 5 years, even, we'll see junior level attorney stuff being churned out by AI. There's a number of reasons for that, including efficiency, just the amount of data, computational power. There's like a lot of reasons to believe that. So it's important to invest in these things for attorneys. AI has like clearly upended everything, because every tool that you've got in your arsenal, like every tool that I have, and even my sort of vanilla ones such as Zoom or Canva, right? They all have AI embedded now, and it's just included, just part of it. There are costs associated with running AI tools, but I think what that means is we're going to be on a pay per usage model, similar to what OpenAI does. So if you don't use ChatGPT Plus, or you do and you have API access, API access is something like, depending on the model, like 3 cents per 1,000 tokens, which is 3 to 4,000 characters. So a token is 3 to 4 characters. So you can think about it a little bit like words. So 1,000 words costs 3 cents. And there's like a lot of processing that goes into that. So like your embeddings have costs, your fine tunings have costs, your generations have costs, your inputs have costs. But spending $500 for unlimited is really not necessary. I think what's going to happen is that a lot of these platforms that, they have a value. Their databases are not easy to replicate. Um, their insights that they provide via various tools, such as their practical guidance things and memos and whatever else, their standard docs, are valuable pieces of IP. Um, I think they're going to charge some sort of surcharge, and then you will connect your own personal AI token to your account with whatever legal research tool. And with that surcharge, that's basically your only charge from them, and then you pay for your own usage with your own AI tokens. So in the same way that you might log into a website with Facebook or with Google or whatever, I suspect that will be maybe using those same tools to authenticate with OpenAI and other providers, with our other tools. So if you have Westlaw, for example, you'll sign into Westlaw, you'll be integrated with your OpenAI account, and then all the costs of processing pass through to your own account. So I don't think the current market of pricing is sustainable with the current capabilities that are out there. So that might mean that this is not something that's worthwhile for companies to really iterate on. I don't know, but I think that understanding your own systems is the place to be, and it's currently cheaper, so it's an easy choice to make. um I believe that's it. A little factoid that I have in my notes here. Chat GPT is 10 times cheaper than GPT-3 was. That was the immediately preceding model that really started kicking off some AI things that we've seen. GPT-3 had 100 times more data than GPT-2 had, and GPT-4, which is the current model, is estimated to have up to 100 times more data than GPT-3 had. So these releases have happened relatively quickly. I believe GPT-3 was in 2020, but obviously, like, the scale of data has rapidly grown, and there's a lot of data that is not included in the current models. I'm I'm sure it's just a matter of time before extra data is brought in, such as um, pacer databases or what have you. Like, there's reasons that these things are going to get more powerful and better. Um, with that, we're at the final slide. Questions. I will be kind of sort of around during this webcast, and I can answer some questions in the chat. But questions other than that, feel free to reach out to me. Follow the blog, rise.law. That's where I occasionally put out new content, usually with how-tos. I like to do how-tos when I have the time. So I have a how-to for setting up your own internal AI tool sets. I have a how-to for setting up your own sort of Zapier replacement, which is dirt cheap. It's and awesome, by the way. Like, without the price, I think it's still, like, I like it better than Zapier. But yeah, things like that where it just sort of helps you get these things up and running for yourself. There are technical documents, but I try to make it as step by step as possible. If you just take it one step at a time, you should end up with an actual working thing that you can use. At some point, I haven't decided when, I'll do a workshop where we'll have some limited seats, like, I don't know, up to 10, probably fewer than 10 people, just so that way I can give you my actual attention. But we'll go through and we'll put together a tool that's workable and usable, when you, quote, walk out the door. So if you subscribe to the blog, you'll get the notification there. I've thought about doing some consulting. So if you really just you have the need now and not the time, that's something you can reach out to me about as well. A@rise.law. So like Alex A@rise.law. Other than that, I hope this has been useful. If there are questions that weren't answered, or if there were questions that you were like happy to see, I would love to hear your feedback. I want to make sure that this content is useful for everyone.